Echo 7.
A flashlight standing upright in the middle of a trail, switched on, beam pointing at the sky. No wind could knock it over. No animal would leave it that way. No person in distress would take the time to balance a flashlight on its base and aim the beam straight up before walking into the forest and never coming back. A pair of reading glasses folded on a rock. Lenses clean. 6 miles from the nearest road. 60 yards from the nearest trail. Carried through dense undergrowth that should have left broken branches and compressed leaves. But the forest between the trail and the rock showed no sign that anyone had walked through it. A cairn of 7 stones stacked beside a creek, built by hands that left no footprints in the mud around it, built from rocks that were still wet from the creek, while the searcher who found it stood watching in a silence, broken only by the whimpering of a dog that would never go near water again. A compass with the needle pointing south. These are not riddles. These are not thought experiments. These are items recovered from search scenes in the Appalachian Mountains between 1969 and 2024. Each one was found at the last known location of a person who vanished. Each one was documented in an after-action report by trained search and rescue personnel who have seen thousands of scenes and know what normal evidence looks like. Each one was photographed, catalogued, and filed away without explanation, because the searchers who found them did not know what to write in the box marked interpretation. They did not know what to do with evidence that raises more questions than it answers. Rangers search for people. They follow tracks. They read terrain. They deploy dogs and helicopters and grid teams that walk shoulder to shoulder through underbrush calling a name until their voices give out. They are trained to find what is lost. They are exceptionally good at their jobs. The Appalachian region has some of the most experienced search and rescue personnel in the country. People who have recovered bodies from places that should have been impossible to reach. People who have found survivors in conditions that should have been fatal. They are not trained to explain what they find, instead. In case after case, across the Appalachian Triangle, the search teams found the missing person's belongings. That is normal. In most wilderness disappearances, equipment is recovered even when the person is not. Packs, phones, water bottles, clothing. The items a person carries into the forest are usually found somewhere along their route. This is expected. This is how missing persons cases work. You find the things. Sometimes you find the person. Sometimes you do not. But the things are almost always there. What is not normal is where the items were found, how they were arranged, and what was found with them that did not belong to anyone. This video documents 12 disappearances in the Appalachian Mountains. The region stretches from Norton, Virginia, through Harlan, Kentucky, to the high ridges of eastern Tennessee, with edges bleeding into the deep hollows of North Carolina and the fog-covered slopes of West Virginia. The terrain is the oldest on the continent. 400 million years of erosion have worn these peaks into rounded shapes that look gentle from a distance and swallow people from up close. The mountains do not look dangerous. They look like the background of a postcard, green and rolling and soft. That is part of what makes them effective. Millions of hikers walk these trails every year. School groups and church groups and families with children in strollers. Through hikers carrying everything they own on their backs. Hunters who know every ridge and hollow within 10 miles of their homes. Day hikers who drive up for a few hours and drive home before dark. Most return with photographs and tired legs and stories about the view from a particular overlook. A small number do not return at all. And when search teams go looking for them, they find things at the scenes that do not match any standard explanation for what happens when a person is lost in the woods. In every one of these 12 cases, the search produced physical evidence that the official reports describe but do not explain. Items in impossible locations. Objects arranged in patterns that do not match accident or animal activity. And in 4 cases, objects at the scene that did not belong to the missing person and have never been identified. The rangers found things. They wrote them down. They sealed the evidence in bags and drove it back to county storage. They moved on to the next search because there is always a next search in mountains this old and this visited. I did not move on. I spent 14 months filing public records requests with 13 county sheriffs, 4 Forest Service district offices, and the National Park Service Investigative Services branch. I obtained after-action reports, evidence logs, and supplemental investigation notes for cases spanning 55 years of disappearances in the Appalachian Mountains. The process was slow. Some counties responded within weeks. Others took months. 2 required appeals. 1 required a state ombudsman intervention before the records were released. I read every report. I extracted every reference to physical evidence found at the scene. I catalogued each item by type, location relative to the last known position of the missing person, condition, and any anomalies noted by the searchers who found it. I built a database. I cross-referenced dates and locations. I looked for patterns that the individual reports could not show, because each report was written in isolation, by a different agency, in a different county, with no awareness that the same anomalies were appearing at scenes across the entire mountain range. Then I did what no one had done before. I compared the evidence across cases, not the disappearances themselves, not the demographics of the missing, not the weather conditions or the time of year, or the experience level of the hikers. The evidence, the objects left behind, the things the rangers found at the scenes but could not explain. When I laid the evidence side by side, I saw something the individual reports could not show, something that changed the way I understand these mountains and the people who vanish in them. The items are not random. They follow a pattern, and the pattern has been repeating in these mountains for at least 55 years. I will present this pattern through the cases themselves. Each case begins with an object, the thing the rangers found, the thing the reports describe but do not explain. By the end of this video, you will have seen 12 objects from 12 disappearances, and you will understand why they cannot be coincidence. You will understand why I believe something is happening in these mountains that no official explanation accounts for. I am not going to tell you what that something is. I do not know. The evidence does not support a definitive conclusion. What the evidence supports is a question that has been hiding in plain sight across 55 years of search reports, waiting for someone to ask it. Here is the first case, and it starts with what the searchers found, not with who they were looking for. Case 1, the sock in the shoe. On June 14th, 1969, a 6-year-old boy was on a family outing in the Spence Field area of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The family has asked that I not use his name, and I have honored that request. The details of the case are a matter of public record, but the family has carried this weight for 55 years, and they have asked for privacy. I will call him Michael. Spence Field is an open grassy bald along the Appalachian Trail at approximately 5,000 feet elevation. On a clear day, you can see the ridges of Tennessee and North Carolina stretching to the horizon. It is one of the most popular picnic areas in the park. Families come here on summer weekends with blankets and coolers, and the expectation that the worst thing that will happen is a bee sting or a sunburn. The terrain is gentle. The grass is short. The visibility is excellent. It is the kind of place where parents feel safe letting children run ahead. Michael was playing with other children from the extended family group. They had planned to hide behind separate bushes and then jump out to surprise the adults. It was a game they had been playing all afternoon, the kind of game that children have played in meadows for as long as there have been children and meadows. Michael ran behind a rhododendron bush approximately 75 feet from where the adults were sitting. The other children emerged from their hiding spots moments later, laughing, ready to startle the grown-ups. Michael did not. His father watched him run behind the bush. He watched the other children come out. He waited for Michael. He called his name. He walked to the bush. Michael was not there. The terrain between the bush and the adults was open meadow. There were no cliffs, no water hazards, no dense undergrowth, no drop-offs, no ravines, no sudden changes in elevation. A 6-year-old boy ran 75 feet across open grass, stepped behind a single bush that was no more than 8 feet wide, and did not come back. The family searched immediately. They fanned out across the meadow. They called his name until their voices cracked. They checked every bush, every depression, every slight dip in the terrain where a small boy might have sat down or curled up. Nothing. No Michael. No response. No sound except the wind across the bald and the growing panic in the voices of people who were realizing that something had gone very wrong, very fast. The search that followed was the largest in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park up to that time. More than 1,400 volunteers joined the effort. National Guard personnel were mobilized from bases across Tennessee and North Carolina. Green Berets from Fort Bragg, who specialized in woodland tracking, joined the search teams. FBI agents arrived to evaluate whether an abduction had occurred. They interviewed every family in the campgrounds. They checked registration logs. They ran background checks on anyone who had been in the park that weekend. The search covered 56 square miles over multiple weeks. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the forest canopy. Dogs were brought in from 3 states. Divers checked every pool and creek within miles of Spence Field. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through rhododendron thickets so dense that visibility dropped to arm's length. They found the sock and the shoe separately. The sock was on the ground near the forest edge, approximately 200 yards from where Michael was last seen. It was his sock. His mother identified it. The shoe was further away, near a creek, in a different direction than the sock. The items were not together. They were not on the same line of travel. A 6-year-old boy would not typically lose one sock in one direction and one shoe in another direction, unless he was moving erratically, or unless the items were separated by something other than walking. The search teams examined the area around each item. They looked for additional evidence of Michael's passage. They found none. No other clothing. No footprints in the soft soil near the creek. No broken branches at the height a child would break them. The sock and the shoe appeared to have been placed where they were found, rather than lost by someone walking through the area. Here is the detail from the search reports that has stayed with investigators for 55 years. A family camping approximately 2 miles from Spence Field that evening reported seeing a figure at the tree line. The father said the figure appeared to be a person, rough-looking, moving away from the meadow into the forest. He said it appeared to be carrying something over its shoulder. The distance was too great and the light too low for certainty. But he was specific about the timing, approximately 2 hours after Michael disappeared. His son also reported the sighting independently. He described the figure differently at first, but later said it was upright and moved like a person. The family reported an unpleasant odor around the same time. Rangers searched the area the following morning. They found nothing. No tracks in the soil, no broken branches, no disturbance in the vegetation. Whatever the family saw, it left no physical evidence of its passage. The sighting was included in the official case file. It has been debated for 55 years. The FBI considered and dismissed several theories. The case remains open. 1,400 searchers, 56 square miles, a sock, a shoe in different directions, and a figure at the tree line that no one has identified. The mountains kept the rest. That was 1969. The pattern of strange evidence at disappearance scenes did not stop. It accelerated. In the decades that followed, searchers across the Appalachian region would encounter scenes that echoed what was found at Spence Field. Items separated, items arranged, items that seemed placed rather than dropped. I did not see the pattern when I read the first report. I did not see it when I read the 10th. It was somewhere around the 20th report, at 3 in the morning in my garage with papers spread across a folding table, that I realized I was not looking at isolated incidents. I was looking at a signature. Something was signing its work at these scenes, and it had been signing it for longer than I had been alive. Case 2. The flashlight. Nora Bridwell was 54 years old, a librarian from Johnson City, Tennessee, who hiked the Cherokee National Forest every Saturday morning before the library opened at 10. She had been doing this for 11 years. She knew the trails the way she knew the Dewey Decimal System, by heart, without needing to think. Every book in the library had a place, and every trail in the Cherokee had a rhythm. and Nora moved through both with the same quiet efficiency that made her the best reference librarian in the county system. Her husband Boyd would sometimes come with her, but more often he would sleep in while Nora got up in the dark, laced her boots, packed her day pack, and drove to whatever trailhead she had chosen for that week. She rotated through a circuit of favorites: Watauga Dam, Iron Mountain, Cross Mountain. She had walked each of them dozens of times. On March 8, 2014, Nora left the Watauga Dam trailhead at 0600 for a sunrise hike along the lakeshore. She carried a phone, a day pack with water and a thermos of coffee, and a small flashlight that she used on the pre-dawn sections of trail before the sun came up. The flashlight was a compact LED model, black body, bright beam, the kind you can buy at any outdoor store for $15. She had owned it for 4 years. She kept it clipped to a lanyard that attached to the side pocket of her pack. She texted Boyd at 0642. "Sun's coming up over the lake. Beautiful morning. Back by 8. That text is the last confirmed communication from Nora Bridwell. At 0830, Boyd drove to the trailhead. Nora's car was there. He waited. At 0900, he called her phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He waited longer. He tried again. Voicemail. He walked the trail. At approximately mile 2, he found the flashlight. It was standing upright in the center of the trail. The beam was on, pointing straight up. The flashlight was balanced on its flat base, perfectly vertical, in the middle of a packed dirt path that saw regular foot traffic. No rock holding it in place. No leaning surface supporting it. No stick propping it up. Standing on its own, switched on, beam aimed at the morning sky that was now fully lit and had no need of a flashlight's illumination. Boyd picked it up. It was Nora's. Same brand, same model, same dent on the barrel from when she had dropped it on the porch the previous winter. The lanyard that should have attached it to her pack was missing. Cut or torn, he could not tell which. He searched the area around the flashlight for 20 minutes. He called her name until his voice was hoarse. No response. No Nora. No sign of where she had gone, or why. He ran back to the trailhead and called the Carter County Sheriff. 58 people searched for Nora Bridwell over 15 days. They found her day pack approximately 300 yards from where the flashlight had been, in a rhododendron thicket off the east side of the trail. The pack was open. Her thermos was inside, still warm. Whatever heat retention technology the thermos used, it should not have kept coffee warm for 3 hours in early March temperatures. But the thermos was warm to the touch when the searcher found it. Her phone was inside the pack, battery at 52%. No outgoing calls or messages after the 0642 text. No indication she had tried to call for help. No indication she had used the phone at all after that text. Her car keys were in the pack. Her sunglasses were clipped to the strap. Everything she had carried that morning was in the pack or within 300 yards of it, except Nora. The search teams examined the trail surface around the flashlight. The packed dirt showed no clear footprints because the trail was well trafficked and the surface was firm. But a tracker from the Carter County Volunteer Rescue Squad noted something in his report that has stayed with me. He wrote that the area immediately around the flashlight, a circle of approximately 2 feet in diameter, showed no scuff marks, no heel impressions, no signs that anyone had bent down or crouched to place the flashlight in its position. The flashlight appeared to have been set on the trail surface without anyone touching the ground around it. Boyd told investigators that Nora was meticulous about her flashlight. She kept it in the side pocket of her pack, always the same pocket, always clipped to the lanyard. She did not carry it in her hand after sunrise. She would have put it away the moment there was enough light to see the trail without it. Sunrise on March 8th in that area was at 0651. Her last text was at 0642, 9 minutes before sunrise. By 0700, the trail would have been fully lit. There was no reason for the flashlight to be out of the pack. Why was the flashlight out of the pack after sunrise? Why was it standing on the trail? Why was it turned on? Why was it pointed at the sky? Why was there no disturbance in the dirt around it? Boyd has a theory. He does not like it. He asked me not to include it in this video, but after 3 conversations and considerable thought, he changed his mind. He said, "If there is any chance that talking about this helps someone else, then it is worth the embarrassment of sounding like a crazy person." He said the flashlight was a signal, not to him, not to anyone on the trail. The beam was pointing straight up, into the sky, into the canopy, into whatever is above the trail at that point. He said, "Nora did not put that flashlight there. Nora would have put it in her pack. Someone or something stood it up and turned it on and pointed it at the sky. I do not know why. I do not want to know why. But the flashlight was a signal, and Nora was the cost." He asked me to record that because a man who walks the same trail every Saturday looking for his wife deserves to have his observations recorded, even if they sound impossible. He still walks that trail, every Saturday. At the same time, Nora used to walk it. He stops at mile 2 and looks at the spot where he found the flashlight. He has never found anything else, but he keeps walking because stopping would mean accepting that she is not coming back, and he is not ready to accept that. Nora Bridwell was not found. The thermos was warm. The flashlight was on. And no one can explain either one. Case 3. The glasses. Wesley Drummond was 67 years old, a retired optometrist from Abingdon, Virginia, who spent his retirement the way he had spent his career, looking at things closely. He was a birder who could identify a warbler by its song before it came into view. He was a wildflower photographer who carried a macro lens into the woods and spent hours framing the perfect shot of a trillium or a lady slipper. He was an amateur geologist who carried a hand lens on every hike and stopped to examine rocks the way most people stop to examine their phones. His wife, Pauline, said that Wesley never walked past anything without looking at it. He looked at tree bark. He looked at lichen. He looked at the way light fell through the canopy at different times of day. He had files of photographs organized by subject, thousands of images of things most people would never notice. He saw the world in detail, and the detail was what made the world worth seeing. On October 19, 2018, Wesley left the Virginia Creeper Trailhead near Damascus for a day hike into the Mount Rogers National Recreation Area. He planned to photograph the fall color change along a ridge section that he had visited every October for 9 years. The same ridge, the same overlook, the same view of the valley below painted in reds and oranges and the particular shade of gold that sugar maples produce in late October. He carried a camera, a phone, a day pack with lunch and water, and the reading glasses he wore on a lanyard around his neck. Wesley was functionally blind without his reading glasses. He could see distance, could walk trails and drive cars, and recognize faces across a room. But he could not read a map, check a phone, examine a plant at close range, or compose a macro photograph without those glasses. They were as essential to him as his boots. At 1300, Wesley texted Pauline, "Colors are spectacular this year. Best I've seen. Heading to the overlook now." At 1600, Pauline called the Grayson County Sheriff when Wesley did not return. She had expected him by 1530 at the latest. He was never late. 30 years of marriage had taught her that Wesley's punctuality was as reliable as his eyesight was not. If he said he would be home by 3:30, he would be home by 3:30, unless something had prevented him. Searchers reached the ridge the following morning at first light. They found his camera and day pack at the overlook, approximately 4 miles from the trailhead. The camera was on the ground, lens cap on, memory card intact. The last photograph was time-stamped at 1312, showing the valley view he had described in his text. The day pack was leaning against the stone wall at the overlook. His phone was in the pack, water bottle inside, half full, sandwich wrapper empty. Everything was there. Wesley had reached the overlook. He had eaten his lunch. He had photographed the view. He had packed up his camera and set it on the ground. And then, something happened. His reading glasses were not in the pack. They were not on the lanyard. They were not at the overlook. They were on a rock, a flat-topped boulder approximately 60 yards from the overlook, off-trail, in a section of forest that had no path or clearing. The glasses were folded, lenses clean, placed in the center of the rock as if someone had set them there with care. The rock was approximately waist height. The glasses were positioned at the exact center of the flat surface, as if measured. Wesley was functionally blind at close range without those glasses. He could not navigate by map. He could not read a compass. He could not check his phone. He could not examine the trail surface for obstacles. Without them, he was operating with half his vision in terrain that required constant visual attention. Why would a man who depends on his reading glasses remove them from his neck, fold them carefully, walk 60 yards off trail into the forest, place them on a specific rock, and walk away blind? 41 people searched for Wesley Drummond over 12 days. They covered every trail, side path, game trail, and drainage within 2 miles of the overlook. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the canopy, looking for any break in the vegetation that might indicate a body. Thermal imaging detected 3 deer and 1 bear, but no human heat signature. On the 8th day, a volunteer tracker with 17 years of experience examined the route from the overlook to the boulder where the glasses were found. The forest between the 2 points is dense, mixed hardwood with a thick understory of mountain laurel and rhododendron. There is no path. There is no game trail. The ground cover is leaf litter over rocky soil that does not hold footprints well. The understory is the kind of vegetation that resists passage, the kind you have to push through rather than walk through. The tracker found no evidence that anyone had walked from the overlook to the boulder. No broken branches at body height, no compressed leaf litter, no scuff marks on moss-covered rocks, no disturbance of any kind. She said that in her experience, a person walking 60 yards through that type of undergrowth would leave at least 5 to 10 visible disturbance points where they pushed through vegetation or stepped on soft ground. She found 0. 0 disturbance points in 60 yards of dense forest. Either Wesley floated to the boulder without touching the ground, or vegetation, or someone else placed the glasses there, or the glasses moved from Wesley to the boulder by a mechanism that does not involve a person walking through the forest carrying them. Pauline told investigators that Wesley would sooner leave the house without pants than without his reading glasses. She said it with a laugh that turned into a sob. She said the glasses being off his body was the detail that convinced her something had happened that was not Wesley's choice. She said, "Wesley did not take those glasses off. I have been married to him for 41 years. He does not take them off. He showers with them around his neck. He sleeps with them on the nightstand within arm's reach. Whatever moved those glasses from his neck to that rock did it against his will or without his knowledge." The reading glasses were the only item not at the overlook. Everything else was together. Camera, pack, phone, water, lunch. Wesley separated the one item he could not function without and placed it further from the trail than any of his other belongings, or something separated it for him. And whatever that something was, it moved through 60 yards of dense undergrowth without breaking a branch or leaving a footprint. Wesley Drummond was not found. 3 cases. A sock and shoe separated by direction. A flashlight standing as a signal in the center of a trail. Reading glasses carried through undergrowth without disturbing a leaf. I want to stop here and tell you what I noticed when I first read these 3 reports in sequence. The items are separated from the person, not randomly, deliberately. The sock and shoe in different directions. The flashlight removed from the pack and stood upright. The glasses removed from the neck and carried to a specific rock. The items are arranged, not scattered, not dropped, not discarded the way a person in distress drops things when they are running or falling or fighting for their life. They are placed, positioned. The flashlight is vertical. The glasses are folded. These are acts of precision performed at scenes where a person has vanished without leaving a footprint. And in every case, the arrangement is visible. The flashlight was in the center of the path, beam up, impossible to miss by anyone walking that trail. The glasses were on a waist-high rock in a gap in the canopy, where afternoon sunlight would catch the lenses and make them glint. The items are not hidden. They are displayed, as if whoever or whatever placed them wanted them to be found. Not the person. The person is hidden. The items are shown. I do not know what this means. I know what it looks like. It looks like evidence arranged for an audience. It looks like a message. And if it is a message, it has been delivered at least 12 times across 55 years, and no one has read it, because no one was reading the reports together until now. Case 4. The Cairn. Greta Hollander was 43 years old, a veterinary technician from Asheville, North Carolina, who spent her days caring for other people's animals and her weekends exploring the forests with her own. She had a border collie named Buckley, who had been her hiking companion for 7 years. Buckley was trained, disciplined, and bonded to Greta in the way that working dogs bond to their people. Where Greta went, Buckley went. They moved through the forest as a unit. On July 11, 2020, Greta and Buckley left the Davidson River trailhead in the Pisgah National Forest at 08:30. She planned to hike the Looking Glass Rock Trail, a moderate 6-mile round trip that she and Buckley had done at least 20 times. She carried a day pack with water, snacks, a collapsible bowl for Buckley, and her phone. She told her partner Tom she would be back by early afternoon. At 1400, Tom texted. No response. At 1430, he called. The phone rang twice and went to voicemail. This was unusual. Greta always answered when Tom called. At 1500, Tom drove to the trailhead. Greta's car was there. The parking lot had several other vehicles, other hikers returning from their own trips into the forest. Tom waited. He watched people come down the trail. He looked for Greta's red jacket and Buckley's black and white markings. Neither appeared. At 1600, Tom started up the trail. He hiked fast, calling Greta's name, then Buckley's. Dogs respond to their names even when their owners do not. Buckley always responded. The trail wound through hemlocks and rhododendron along a creek, crossing the water twice on wooden bridges before climbing toward the rock face. At the second creek crossing, approximately 1.5 miles from the trailhead, Tom found Buckley. The dog was sitting on the bank downstream of the bridge, approximately 30 feet from the trail, not lying down, sitting, upright, alert, staring at the water. Tom called his name. Buckley did not move. Tom called again. The dog turned his head, looked at Tom, and then turned back to the water. He was trembling. Tom approached slowly. Buckley did not run to him, did not wag, did not do any of the things a border collie does when a familiar person approaches. He sat and trembled and stared at the water. On the bank beside Buckley, there was a cairn. 7 stones stacked in a neat pile, largest at the bottom, smallest at the top. River-smooth stones, the kind that line the creek bed at that crossing. Wet stones, freshly stacked. The water was still beating on the surfaces. Tom looked at the cairn. He looked at the creek. He looked at the mud along the bank. There were no footprints in the mud. None. The bank was soft, saturated from recent rain. It held prints beautifully. Buckley's paw prints were clearly visible where the dog had walked to his sitting position. Tom's boot prints were forming as he stood there. But between the cairn and the water, where someone would have to stand to collect the stones and stack them, there was nothing. Undisturbed mud. Perfect preservation of a surface that showed no sign of human contact. Tom touched one of the stones. Cool. Wet. Heavy for its size. He picked it up and felt the water run down his wrist. The stone had been in the creek minutes ago. Not hours. Minutes. Tom found Buckley and the cairn at approximately 15:30. The last contact from Greta was when she failed to answer his text at 1400. More than 90 minutes earlier. The rocks should have been bone dry by the time Tom arrived. Creekbed stones dry fast in July sun. These stones were wet enough to drip. Someone had stacked those rocks recently, within the last 20 to 30 minutes, while Tom was on the trail, walking toward the creek crossing, calling his partner's name. Someone or something was at the creek building a cairn from wet stones. Greta's day pack was found approximately 200 yards upstream from the cairn. Her phone was in the pack. Her collapsible bowl was beside the creek, filled with water, as if she had set it out for Buckley to drink. Her water bottle was in the pack, nearly empty. She had drunk most of it during the morning hike. Everything suggested a normal rest stop. She had stopped at the creek. She had filled Buckley's bowl. She had maybe drunk some water herself. And then she had vanished, leaving behind a pack, a bowl, a dog, and a cairn that someone built without stepping in the mud. 63 people searched for Greta Hollander over 21 days. They checked every trail, every drainage, every ridgeline within 3 miles of the creek crossing. They brought in teams from 4 counties. Dive teams checked the pools upstream and downstream of the crossing, probing the deeper sections with poles, sending divers into any water deep enough to conceal a body. They found nothing. Helicopters flew thermal passes over the canopy for 4 consecutive days. No heat signature. On the 9th day, a forensic tracker from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation examined the creek crossing in detail. He documented the muddy areas along both banks. He photographed every print. He cataloged Tom's boot prints, Buckley's paw prints, and the prints of the search teams that had worked the area over the previous 8 days. He found no unidentified prints. None. In the soft mud surrounding the cairn, within a radius of approximately 10 feet, the only marks in the ground belonged to Tom, Buckley, and the searchers. Whoever built the cairn did not stand in the mud to do it. The tracker measured the distance from the nearest firm ground to the cairn's location. Approximately 4 feet of soft mud. A person would need to stand within 2 feet of the cairn to reach it and stack stones on it. That 2-foot radius was mud. Soft, wet creek bank mud that held every print that was placed in it. No one stood there, but someone stacked 7 stones. The tracker's report included one sentence that the lead investigator highlighted, and that I have read perhaps 100 times since obtaining the file. The evidence at the scene is consistent with the cairn being constructed by an agent that did not make contact with the surrounding substrate. An agent that did not touch the ground. Tom still has Buckley. The dog is 9 years old now, gray around the muzzle, slower than he used to be. He has not been on a trail since July 11th, 2020. He will not go near the mountains. He will not go near running water. He stands at the edge of a swimming pool at a friend's house and trembles the same way he trembled at the creek crossing 4 years ago. He sits in Tom's house and stares at the wall, and every now and then, he presses himself against Tom's leg and shivers, and Tom reaches down and holds him, and neither of them can explain what happened at that creek. Tom told me one more thing. He said that when he found Buckley at the crossing, the dog was staring upstream, not looking, staring, with the intensity of a border collie locking onto a sheep, the full predatory focus that the breed is known for. Every muscle tensed, every sense engaged. But Buckley was not tracking prey. He was tracking something upstream that Tom could not see. Tom looked upstream. He saw the creek, the hemlocks, the rocks, the trail continuing into the forest. Nothing else. Nothing that should have held a dog's attention with that kind of intensity. Buckley saw something. 4 years later, he still will not look at water. Greta Hollander was not found. 4 cases. A sock and shoe separated by direction from a boy who vanished behind a bush. A flashlight standing as a signal on a windy trail. Reading glasses carried 60 yards through undergrowth without breaking a branch. A cairn built by something that did not touch the ground. The rangers found these things. They documented them. They could not explain them. Here is what I noticed when I looked at all 4 cases together. The items are separated from the person. Not randomly. Deliberately. The sock and shoe in different directions. The flashlight removed from the pack and stood upright. The glasses removed from the neck and carried to a specific rock. The cairn built from creek rocks at the exact spot where the dog was staring. The items are arranged. Not scattered. Not dropped. Not discarded the way a person in distress drops things. They are placed. Positioned. The flashlight is vertical. The glasses are folded. The cairn is stacked. These are acts of precision performed at scenes where a person has vanished without leaving a footprint. And in every case, the arrangement is visible from the trail. The flashlight was in the center of the path, beam up, impossible to miss. The glasses were on a waist-high rock in a gap in the canopy, where sunlight would catch the lenses. The cairn was at the water's edge where any hiker crossing the creek would see it. The items are not hidden. They are displayed, as if whoever or whatever placed them wanted them to be found. Not the person. The person is hidden. The items are shown. I do not know what this means. I know what it looks like. It looks like evidence arranged for an audience. It looks like a message. And if it is a message, it has been delivered at least 12 times across 55 years, and no one has read it, because no one was reading the cases together. The pattern from the first 4 cases is simple. Items separated from the missing person. Items arranged with precision. Items displayed where they will be found. The next 4 cases follow the same structure, but the items become harder to explain, because in these cases, the objects found at the scene do not just raise questions about where they were placed. They raise questions about what happened to them while they were there. They raise questions about the nature of physical reality in certain locations in these mountains. Case 5. The Watch. Cliff Renner was 48 years old, a machinist from Bristol, Tennessee, who hunted wild turkey in the Cherokee National Forest every spring. He was the kind of hunter who woke at 3 in the morning without an alarm, drove to the woods in the dark, and sat motionless against a tree for 4 hours waiting for a bird that might never come. He did not find this boring. He found it essential. He said the forest in the pre-dawn dark was the only place in the world where his mind stopped racing, the only place where the noise in his head went quiet. His wife Donna understood. She did not share his passion for hunting, but she understood what the woods did for him. She packed his thermos the night before. She kissed him goodbye in the dark kitchen. She waited for him to come home with stories about the gobbler he had heard but not seen, or the one he had called in but could not get a clear shot at, or the occasional bird that came home in the back of his truck. On April 9th, 2021, Cliff left the Paint Creek trailhead at 0400 for a spring gobbler hunt. He carried a shotgun, a slate call that he had made himself from a piece of cherry wood, a thermos of coffee, and a wristwatch that his father had given him in 1992. The watch was analog, mechanical, a self-winding movement that ran on the motion of the wearer's arm. No battery, no electronics, no digital components, just gears and springs doing what gears and springs have done for 400 years. Cliff wore it every day. He had worn it for 29 years. Donna said she could not picture her husband's wrist without that watch on it. Cliff's father had died in 2003. The watch was one of 3 things Cliff kept from his father's belongings. The watch, a pocket knife, and a photograph of the 2 of them at a lake in East Tennessee from when Cliff was 11. The watch ran perfectly. It had run perfectly for 29 years. It lost or gained no more than a few seconds per day, which is exceptional accuracy for a mechanical movement. Cliff had it serviced once, in 2010, when the mainspring needed replacement. Otherwise, it required nothing but wearing. Donna expected Cliff home by noon. At 1300, she called his phone. Voicemail. At 1400, she drove to the trailhead. His truck was there. She walked the trail calling his name until dark. She has done this enough times in the 4 years since to wear a visible path from the parking lot to the spot where the volunteers found his things. The Unicoi County Sheriff deployed searchers the following morning at first light. They found Cliff's turkey call and thermos at the base of a white oak approximately 1 mile from the trailhead. The scene was orderly. The call was on the ground, upright, as if set down by hand. The thermos was beside it, cap screwed on, coffee still inside and still warm in the vacuum seal. His shotgun was leaning against the tree at approximately a 45-degree angle, safety on, unfired, the way a hunter places a gun when he plans to pick it up again in a moment. Nothing at the scene suggested distress. Nothing suggested haste. Nothing suggested an animal encounter or a fall or any emergency that would cause a man to abandon a loaded shotgun in the woods. The arrangement looked like a man who had decided to take a break and walk a few steps away, and then had not come back from whatever he walked toward. His watch was on the ground beside the thermos, face up, crystal intact, second hand moving backward. The watch was running counterclockwise. The second hand was sweeping from 12 to 11 to 10 to 9, steady, smooth, at the correct speed, but in the wrong direction. The searcher who found it, a volunteer with 8 years of SAR experience named Dale Hutchins, photographed the watch and noted the time in his field book. According to the watch face, the time was 11:47. According to his phone, the time was 08:23. The watch was not only running backward, it was showing a time that had already passed, a time from nearly 4 hours in the future if you assumed the watch had been running backward all night, a time that made no sense in any direction. Dale picked up the watch and held it in his hand for approximately 30 seconds. The second hand continued to move counterclockwise. He shook it. No change. He set it on a flat rock and watched it for 2 full minutes. Counterclockwise. Steady. Smooth. The same consistent backward movement that a properly functioning watch would make going forward. He sealed it in an evidence bag and continued the search. He said later that he did not mention the backward movement to the other searchers because he did not know how to describe it without sounding like he had lost his mind. He wrote it in his field notes. He took photographs that clearly showed the position of the hands, but he did not talk about it until the investigation was closed without resolution, and he felt he could speak freely. I obtained the watch through a records request after the case was closed. The watch was returned to Donna, but she allowed me to borrow it for analysis. She said she had not worn it. She said she had not wound it. She said it sat on her nightstand, where it had always sat when Cliff was home, and she could not bring herself to touch it. I brought it to a watchmaker in Knoxville who has serviced mechanical timepieces for 36 years. His name is Gerald Webb. He examined the watch for 2 hours. He disassembled the movement. He examined every gear, every spring, every jewel bearing. He tested the mainspring tension. He checked the balance wheel. He inspected the escapement under magnification. His conclusion was unambiguous. The watch was mechanically sound. Nothing was broken. Nothing was bent. Nothing was modified. The escapement, the component that regulates the direction of the gear train and determines which way the watch runs, was functioning correctly. It was manufactured correctly. It was assembled correctly. It was performing exactly as designed. He said, "This movement cannot run backward. The geometry of the escapement does not permit it. The escapement releases the gear train in one direction only, clockwise. It is physically impossible for this watch to run counterclockwise unless the escapement has been modified to permit it. This escapement has not been modified. If the second hand was moving counterclockwise when the watch was found, either the escapement was behaving differently at that location than it behaves in my shop, or something was acting on the movement from outside that overcame the mechanical constraint. I have been working on watches for 36 years. I have never seen a mechanical movement run in reverse. I would have said it was impossible if you had not shown me the photographs." He reassembled the watch. He wound it. It ran clockwise. Normal. He tested it for 2 weeks. It never ran backward again. I returned the watch to Donna. She put it back on the nightstand. She said Cliff would want it there. Cliff Renner was not found. 52 people searched for 18 days. His phone was never recovered. His body was never located. The watch that ran backward at the scene runs forward in a watchmaker's shop and on a nightstand in Bristol. Something at that white oak, at that specific location in the Cherokee National Forest, made a mechanical watch do something its own gears do not allow. And then it stopped doing it once the watch was removed from the scene. The scene does something to objects. The scene changes the rules. Case 6, the pack in the tree. Jolene Sparks was 39 years old, a middle school science teacher from Irwin, Tennessee, who had discovered trail running 5 years earlier and had never looked back. She ran before dawn, alone, with a headlamp and a small hydration pack, eating up miles of trail while most people were still asleep. She said the forest in the early morning was the best classroom she had ever been in. She said the lessons it taught were more important than anything in the curriculum. Her husband, Paul, worried about her running alone. He asked her to carry her phone. He asked her to share her location. He asked her to stay on the main trails. She did all of these things. She was careful. She was sensible. She was exactly the kind of person who takes reasonable precautions and expects reasonable outcomes. On September 14th, 2022. Jolene left the trailhead at Unaka Mountain at 05:15. Paul tracked her location on a phone app. The app showed her moving along the trail at her normal pace for approximately 4 miles. Steady progress. Normal speed. Everything as expected. At 06:03, the location stopped updating. Paul assumed her phone had lost signal, which happened frequently on Unaka Mountain. The terrain was rugged. The coverage was spotty. The app losing contact for 15 or 20 minutes was normal. At 0800, when Jolene had not returned and the app still showed her location frozen at the same point, Paul drove to the trailhead. Her car was there. He hiked the trail at a jog, calling her name every 100 yards. At mile 3.7, approximately where the phone had stopped updating, Paul found Jolene's headlamp on the trail. It was switched off, placed on a flat rock at the trail's edge. Her running shoes were beside the headlamp, side by side, laces still tied, as if she had pulled them off without untying them, the way you slip off shoes at the front door. He looked up. Jolene's hydration pack was hanging from a branch approximately 30 feet above the ground, suspended by one strap, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. Paul stood beneath the tree and stared at the pack for what he later estimated was a full minute. He said his mind could not process what he was seeing. His wife's pack, the one she wore every morning, the one he watched her put on in the kitchen at 04:45, was hanging from a branch that was higher than the roof of their house. The tree was a tulip poplar, common in that part of the forest. The trunk rose straight and smooth for approximately 20 feet before the first branch. There were no limbs, no knots, no footholds below the branch where the pack was hanging. The bark was smooth gray-green, the texture that tulip poplars develop in their mature years. A person could not climb this tree without equipment, not without rope, not without climbing spikes, not without something to grip. Jolene was 5'4" and weighed 118 pounds. She was a trail runner, not a tree climber. She was wearing running clothes, not climbing gear. She was carrying a hydration pack and running shoes. No rope, no harness, no slings. No equipment that would allow a person to ascend 30 feet of smooth trunk. Paul photographed the pack from the ground. The image shows the pack clearly, hanging by one strap from a branch that is approximately 4 inches in diameter, at a height that would require a 20-foot ladder to reach. He called the Unicoi County Sheriff. Searchers arrived within 2 hours. They brought a 12-foot ladder from a maintenance truck, set it against the tree, and could not reach the branch. They had to extend the ladder with a second section borrowed from the Irwin Fire Department to retrieve the pack. Inside was Jolene's phone, her ID a gel packet, unopened, her car keys. The hydration bladder was full, 2 liters of water. Jolene had not drunk from it. She had been running for approximately 48 minutes before the phone signal stopped. In September heat, on a trail with elevation gain, a runner does not go 48 minutes without drinking in those conditions. Either she did not drink, or the bladder was refilled after she stopped. Jolene was not found. The tree was examined by a Forest Service arborist on the 3rd day of the search. He confirmed that the lowest branch was at approximately 21 feet. He measured the trunk diameter at breast height. He examined the bark in sections, photographing it at high resolution. He found no scuff marks, no rope marks, no compression damage, no insect gallery disturbance that would indicate someone had gripped or stood on the bark. He said, "This tree has not been climbed. The bark is intact in a pattern consistent with natural weathering and nothing else. There is no mechanical damage anywhere on the trunk below the first branch." He paused before adding, "I cannot explain how that pack got where it was, and I have been climbing and assessing trees for 22 years. 61 people searched for Jolene Sparks over 19 days. Her body was never recovered. Her running shoes are in Paul's closet. The headlamp is on his nightstand. He charges it every week, the way Jolene used to, so it is ready to go if she comes back. A pack 30 feet in the air in a tree that cannot be climbed. Running shoes on the ground below. A headlamp placed neatly on a rock. The items were separated. The pack was elevated. The shoes and headlamp were displayed at trail level, where they would be found by the next person who walked past. The pack was visible from below, but unreachable without equipment. The same pattern. Items arranged. Items displayed. Items separated from the person by distance, by direction, or in this case, by height. Something put that pack in that tree. Something that could reach 30 feet without climbing. Something that left no mark on the bark. Case 7. The Journal. Walt Renfro was 61 years old, a retired high school English teacher from Boone, North Carolina, who spent his retirement writing and hiking in equal measure. He kept a journal on every hike, recording not just the route and the weather, but his thoughts about the forest, the light, the way a particular ridge looked at a particular time of year. His journals filled 2 shelves in his study, more than 100 notebooks going back 40 years. His daughter Abby said the journals were her father's real legacy, the observations of a man who paid attention to the world and wrote it down. On May 1st, 2022, Walt left the E.B. Jeffress Park trailhead in the Blue Ridge Mountains for a 3-day solo hike along a section of the Tanawa Trail. He planned to camp at 2 backcountry sites and return on May 3rd. He carried a tent, a sleeping bag, food, water, his phone, and a moleskin notebook with a brown cover that he had started 2 weeks earlier. He checked in with Abby by text on May 1st and May 2nd. Normal messages, trail updates, weather observations. He mentioned the wildflowers were early this year. He mentioned he had seen a black bear at a distance and had made noise until it moved away. He mentioned the sunset on May 1st was the color of a good Cabernet. On May 3rd, he did not check in. Abby waited. She called. Voicemail. She called again at noon. Voicemail. She contacted the Watauga County Sheriff at 1400. Searchers found his tent at a ridgeline campsite approximately 8 miles from the trailhead. The tent was up, properly staked, fly attached. His sleeping bag was inside, unrolled, but not slept in. The bag was positioned correctly, but showed no body impression, no compression consistent with a person lying in it. His phone was dead, last signal on May 2nd at 22:47. His journal was not in the tent. It was on a rock approximately 50 feet from the campsite, at the edge where the maintained ridge meets the unmaintained slope below. Open, face down, as if someone had set it there while reading it and forgotten to pick it up. The journal contained entries through May 2nd, consistent with the dates of his hike, but it also contained entries for May 3rd, and May 4th, and May 5th, and May 6th. 4 days of entries written in Walt's handwriting, with Walt's pen, in Walt's distinctive style, describing days that had not yet happened when the journal was found on May 3rd. I want you to understand what I am telling you. The searchers found this journal on May 3rd, 2022, and it contained dated entries for May 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, entries in the handwriting of a man who had been missing since sometime on May 2nd. Abby confirmed the handwriting. She looked at every entry. She said it was unmistakably her father's hand. The same pressure, the same letter formations, the same way he crossed his T's and dotted his I's, the same small sketches of plants and rocks in the margins. It was Walt's writing. The content of the entries is what disturbed the investigators. May 3rd. Woke before dawn. The ridge continues east. I did not expect this. The trees are different here. Older. The bark is gray where it should be brown. The air is colder than it should be at this elevation in May. I have hiked this ridge 100 times. This is not the same ridge. May 4th. I cannot find the trail back. I have walked in every direction. The ridge is not where it was. I can hear water running somewhere below me, but I cannot reach it. The sound moves when I move, as if it is staying the same distance from me, regardless of which direction I walk. May 5th. The light does not change. It has been the same light since I arrived here. Not morning, not afternoon, not the golden hour I came to write about. The same flat amber light from a source I cannot locate. I do not think this is the same forest. I do not think I am on the same mountain. I do not think I can get back. May 6th. If anyone finds this journal, tell Abby I love her. Tell her I did not mean to go. Tell her I was walking to the overlook to see the sunrise and the path continued where it should have ended, and I followed it because I am a fool who follows paths. Amber light. The same phrase that appeared in photographs from a different investigation I have worked on. The same wrong light in a place that should not exist. Searchers checked the area below the ridge in the direction Walt's May 4th entry described. They found dense forest, no trail, no continuation of the path, no trees with gray bark, no cold air, nothing that matched his description, nothing that suggested the place Walt described in his journal entries existed anywhere on that mountain. Walt Renfro was not found. 47 people searched for 16 days. Abby keeps the journal now. She reads it sometimes. She said the sentence that stays with her is from May 5th. "I do not think I can get back." She said her father was a man who always found his way back. From bad marriages, from financial trouble, from the grief of losing his wife to cancer in 2018, he always found a path. He always came home. She said, he wrote, "I do not think I can get back. Not I cannot get back." He did not think he could. That means he was still trying. Wherever he was, if the journal is real, he was still trying on May 6th. The journal is in Avery County evidence storage now. The entries are real. The handwriting is real. And the days they describe had not yet happened when the journal was found. Either Walt Renfro somehow wrote 4 days of journal entries in the past about events that had not yet occurred, or someone replicated his handwriting perfectly, or time works differently at certain locations in these mountains than it works everywhere else. I do not know which explanation is correct. None of them should be possible. Case 8, the compass. This case is real. It happened on November 11th, 2024. The search drew national attention. The investigation is ongoing. I have confirmed the details through public records, news reports, and conversations with people familiar with the search. Charles Hosch was 65 years old, an attorney from Dallas, Texas, who had grown up in Gainesville, Georgia, and never stopped loving the mountains of his home state. He returned multiple times a year. Blood Mountain, a 4,400-foot peak along the Appalachian Trail, about 30 miles south of the North Carolina border, was his home ground. He had hiked it dozens of times. He knew every switchback, every overlook, every spot where the trail crossed water or opened onto a view. Charles grew up in Gainesville, graduated as president of his senior class, and built a successful career as an attorney in Dallas. But the mountains of North Georgia never let him go. They were in his blood in a way that Texas never was. He talked about the mountains the way some people talk about a first love, the way the light hit the ridges in October, the way the fog sat in the valleys on spring mornings, the way Blood Mountain looked from the Appalachian Trail approach, massive and green and permanent. On that November morning, Charles drove to the Byron Herbert Reese trailhead and started up the trail toward the summit. The hike was approximately 5 miles round trip, moderate difficulty, nothing Charles had not done many times before. His daughter Julia and other family members knew his plans. He had told his law partner, a woman named Morris, that he was going. She told him he should not hike alone. He went anyway. He always went. Charles was last seen by a fellow hiker at the top of Blood Mountain at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. The hiker, whose name has not been released, said Charles appeared fine, in good spirits, enjoying the view from the summit. He said Charles was heading back down the trail toward the parking lot where his car was waiting. He did not arrive at the trailhead. His family reported him missing that evening when he failed to return home and did not answer his phone. The search that followed was one of the largest in recent Georgia history. Dozens of volunteers, professional search teams from multiple agencies, family members who refused to stop looking. They covered Blood Mountain and the surrounding trails for weeks. They searched drainages and boulder fields and every ravine where a person might have fallen. Hayward Hosch, Charles's older brother, who was in his early 70s, hiked the mountain nearly every day. He called his brother's name. He checked places the official searchers had already checked. He carried sack lunches deep into the woods for the volunteer teams who were giving up their own time to look for a man they had never met. Charles's daughter Julia coordinated volunteer briefings with her 1-year-old daughter strapped to her chest, organizing search grids while caring for an infant. Locals who know the mountains said something that has stayed with me. They said that in the mountains, if there is a dead body, buzzards will circle overhead and lead you to it. That is how some bodies are found. You watch the sky. In the weeks after Charles's disappearance, there were no buzzard sightings anywhere on Blood Mountain. 2 residents who live within miles of the trail confirmed this. The birds that find the dead were not finding anything. No body was found. No clothing beyond what I am about to describe. No gear. No footprints leading off the established trail. A man was seen at the summit at 1:30 in the afternoon, headed down the most popular trail in North Georgia, and was not seen again by any of the dozens of hikers who were on the mountain that afternoon. 1 item was recovered. Charles's jacket was found draped over a trail marker post approximately 1 mile below the summit, on the standard descent route. The jacket was neatly placed, folded once, laid over the horizontal arm of the marker as if someone had hung it there to dry. But it was not wet. The jacket was dry, clean, in good condition. Here is what does not make sense. The weather on November 11th included rain. Steady rain began at approximately 1400, 30 minutes after Charles was seen at the summit, and continued through the evening. Every surface on the mountain was soaked by 1500. The trail was mud. The trees were dripping. The wooden posts of the trail markers were dark with absorbed water. Charles's jacket was dry. It was found on November 13th, 2 full days after his disappearance, after 2 days of intermittent rain. Everything on the mountain was wet. Everything. The ground, the rocks, the posts, the leaves. The jacket was dry, as if it had been placed there after the rain stopped, or as if the rain had not touched it while everything around it was soaked. In the pocket of the jacket, searchers found a small button compass, the kind you can buy for $2 at a camping store. A simple liquid-filled compass with a floating needle that should point north. It was not Charles's. His family confirmed he did not carry a button compass. He used his phone for navigation when he needed it, which was rarely because he knew Blood Mountain well enough to walk it blindfolded. The compass needle was pointing south. A standard compass needle points north. It aligns with the Earth's magnetic field, which runs roughly north-south. The needle points north everywhere on Earth, except at the magnetic poles and in locations with extreme local magnetic anomalies. It does not point south unless the compass is defective, unless a strong local magnetic field reverses the direction of the needle, or unless the polarity of the needle has been artificially reversed by exposure to a strong magnet. The compass was examined by an investigator who tested it at multiple locations away from Blood Mountain. At every location, the needle pointed north. Normal function. Normal behavior. The compass was not defective. He brought it back to the trail marker where the jacket had been found. The needle pointed south. He walked 50 feet down the trail. The needle pointed north. He walked back to the marker. South. He repeated this 3 times with the same result. At the trail marker, south. Everywhere else, north. Something at that specific location on Blood Mountain reverses the polarity of a compass needle. Something at that exact spot, that one trail marker, creates a magnetic anomaly strong enough to flip the direction a compass points. And someone placed a dry jacket and a south-pointing compass at that location after a man walked down the mountain and disappeared. Charles Hodge's family continues to search. His brother Hayward has said he will keep coming back to Blood Mountain until Charles is found, or until he cannot walk anymore. His daughter Julia has coordinated volunteer search efforts while raising her daughter. The jacket was dry in the rain. The compass points south at one specific spot on Earth and north everywhere else. Charles walked down a busy trail on a popular mountain and was not seen by anyone after 1:30 in the afternoon. 8 cases, 8 items that do not make sense. A sock and shoe separated by direction. A flashlight standing upright, beam to the sky. Reading glasses carried through undergrowth without disturbing a leaf. A cairn built without footprints. A watch that runs backward at the scene and forward everywhere else. A pack 30 feet in a tree that cannot be climbed. A journal with entries from days that had not happened. A jacket dry after 2 days of rain, with a compass that points south at one location and north everywhere else. Combined, these items form a picture that I did not expect to see when I started this investigation. I expected to find cases where people got lost, where accidents happened, where the mountains did what mountains do, which is punish mistakes with consequences. I did not expect to find evidence that behaves impossibly. I did not expect to find the same impossible behaviors repeating across 55 years and 4 states. I did not expect to see a pattern. But there is a pattern, and the pattern does not stop at 8 cases. The final 4 cases escalate the evidence to a point where coincidence becomes impossible. Something at these scenes is not reacting to the disappearance. Something is participating in it. Something is leaving objects behind that should not exist, in places they should not be, with properties they should not have. Case 9. The Stone. Frank Jessup was 57 years old, a stonemason from Greenville, Tennessee, who had built fireplaces and retaining walls and stone paths in the Smoky Mountain region for 30 years. He knew rock the way a chef knows ingredients. He could identify a stone's composition by weight and texture before he picked it up. He could tell you which quarry a piece of granite came from by the color of its crystals. His hands had handled more tons of stone than most geologists examine in a career. On November 2, 2020, Frank left his house at 05:30 for a solo turkey hunt in the Cherokee National Forest. He carried a shotgun, a pack with food and water, a phone, and the same leather gloves he wore on every hunt, soft from decades of use. His wife Doris expected him home by noon. At 1300 she called. Voicemail. At 14:30 she drove to the trailhead. His truck. No Frank. The Coss County Sheriff deployed searchers the following morning. They found Frank's pack at the base of a ridge approximately 2 miles from the trailhead. His shotgun was leaning against a tree, safety on, unfired. His gloves were on the ground beside the pack, folded together, leather still creased from his grip. On a flat rock where the pack was resting, there was a stone. Not a creek rock, not a piece of local sandstone or limestone, not any type of rock that belongs on that ridge in the Cherokee National Forest. The stone was smooth, dark, approximately the size of a man's palm, and heavy for its size, heavier than it should have been. Frank's brother, who is also a stonemason with 28 years of experience, examined it at the sheriff's request. He said it was basalt, dense volcanic rock formed from cooled lava. The nearest natural basalt deposit to that location is approximately 400 miles away in the volcanic formations of Central Virginia. The next nearest is even farther. Basalt does not occur naturally in the sedimentary and metamorphic terrain of eastern Tennessee. It does not wash downstream from Virginia. It does not get carried by animals. It does not fall from the sky. There is no geological process that would place a piece of basalt on a ridge in the Cherokee National Forest. Someone placed a stone from 400 miles away on a rock beside a missing man's pack. The stone had one additional feature that I need to describe carefully, because it is the detail that changed how I understand these cases. On its flat side, pressed into the surface, there was a mark, not carved, not scratched, not painted or drawn, pressed, impressed, as if something had pushed into the stone while it was soft and left an indentation that hardened when the stone cooled. The impression was a handprint, small, approximately the size of a child's hand, 5 or 6 years old, 4 fingers and a thumb, pressed into basalt that is millions of years old and has not been soft since the volcanic event that created it. A forensic geologist from the University of Tennessee examined the stone at the request of the investigation. He confirmed the basalt identification. He confirmed the impression was not carved, ground, or artificially created by any tool he could identify. He said the only way to leave an impression in basalt is to press into it while it is molten, at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. He said, "This impression was made when the rock was forming. It is as old as the stone itself, millions of years. A handprint, the size of a child's hand, in a rock that is millions of years old, placed beside the pack of a missing man on a ridge where basalt does not exist. Who left that handprint? How did they leave it in molten rock? How did the rock travel 400 miles? Who placed it at the scene of a disappearance? Why? I do not have answers. I have the stone. I have the photographs. I have the geologist's report. 59 people searched for Frank Jessup over 20 days. He was not found. The stone is in Cocke County evidence storage. The handprint faces up. Case 10. The photograph. Audrey Kellum was 36 years old, a pharmacist from Roanoke, Virginia, who hiked a different section of the Appalachian Trail every spring. She had been section hiking for 8 years, working her way from Georgia toward Maine 1 week at a time. She was methodical about it. She kept a journal of her progress. She took photographs of trail markers and overlooks to document her journey. On April 22, 2023, Audrey started a planned 5-day section hike in the Jefferson National Forest near Pearisburg, Virginia. She carried a tent, a sleeping bag, food, water, a satellite messenger for emergency communication, and a camera she used to document her hikes. She checked in with her mother via the satellite messenger on the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. Normal messages, location updates, a note about the wildflowers being particularly good this year. On the 25th, no check-in arrived. Her mother waited through the morning, no message. She contacted the Giles County Sheriff that afternoon. Searchers found Audrey's tent at a backcountry shelter approximately 20 miles into her route. Everything was in order. Pack inside. Sleeping bag rolled. Food bag hung from the bear cable. Phone dead. Battery depleted. Satellite messenger showing last transmission April 24th at 1942. Her camera was not in the tent. It was found half a mile north of the shelter, sitting on a log beside the trail, lens cap off, turned on, as if someone had set it there mid-use. The memory card contained 147 photographs. 143 were wildflower and trail images, time-stamped April 22nd through 24th. Normal photographs, the kind Audrey took on every hike. Photographs 144 through 147 were different. Photograph 144 was time-stamped April 26th, the day the search began, 2 days after her last check-in, 2 days after she was last confirmed to be at the shelter. The photograph showed the trail near the shelter, looking north. In the center of the frame, approximately 30 feet away, there was a figure on the trail, a woman, walking away from the camera. Blue jacket, dark hiking pants, brown shoulder-length hair. Audrey owned a blue jacket. Audrey had brown shoulder-length hair. Audrey was last seen wearing dark pants. The figure was photographed from behind. The face is not visible. The identity cannot be confirmed by the image alone, but the clothing, the hair, the height, and the build are consistent with Audrey's description. The figure in the photograph looks like Audrey Kellum. Audrey's camera documented what appears to be her own departure, on a day she was already missing, from a camera that was found half a mile from where she slept. Either someone used her camera to photograph a woman who looked like her, or Audrey used her own camera 2 days after vanishing to record herself walking away, then left the camera on a log and continued north into the forest. The trail north of the shelter was searched for miles. No one matching the description was found. No thru-hiker reported seeing a woman in a blue jacket on April 26th. No other trail users photographed anyone matching that description. 55 people searched for Audrey Kellum over 17 days. She was not found. The photograph sits in the evidence file. A woman in blue, walking away, into the trees. The last image on the camera of a person who was already gone when it was taken. Case 11. The map. Boyd Chesser was 51 years old, a civil engineer from Knoxville who planned every hike the way he planned bridge foundations. Printed topographic maps, red pen route markings, water sources circled in blue, elevation noted at waypoints. His wife Laura said his map preparation was more detailed than his professional blueprints. She said watching him prepare for a hike was like watching a general plan a campaign. On August 16, 2024, Boyd left the Cosby Knob trailhead in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park for a solo day hike along the Snake Den Ridge Trail. He planned to hike to the junction with the Appalachian Trail and return, approximately 10 miles round trip. At 10:42, he texted Laura, "Having a great morning. Trail is empty. Perfect weather." At 1400, Laura called. No answer. She waited. Called again at 1500. No answer. She contacted the Park Service. Searchers found his pack approximately 4 miles from the trailhead, sitting upright against a tree. Phone inside. Battery at 38%. Trekking poles leaning against the tree beside the pack. Water bottle half full. Everything in order. Everything suggesting a man who had stopped to rest and then had not gotten up again. His map case was on the ground approximately 10 feet from the pack. Open. A map inside. Not Boyd's map. The map was a USGS topographic quadrangle of the same area. Same paper stock. Same contour lines. Same grid markings. But the route marked in red pen was not the Snake Den Ridge Trail that Boyd had planned to hike. The route on this map showed a line leaving the trail at approximately the point where Boyd's pack was found, descending northeast into a drainage that paralleled the main trail. At the end of the red line, approximately 1.5 miles from the trail, there was a mark, a small circle, and beside the circle in careful handwriting, one word. Here. Laura confirmed the handwriting was Boyd's. Same red pen brand he always used. Same annotation style. Same tiny elevation numbers written beside the contour lines. The same habit he had developed in engineering school and never broken. But she had watched him prepare the Snake Den Ridge map at the kitchen table on Thursday evening. She had watched him draw the route. She had watched him mark the water sources and the elevation points. That map did not have an alternate route descending into a drainage. It did not have a circle. It did not have the word, here. The map in the case was prepared by Boyd in Boyd's handwriting, with Boyd's pen showing a route he did not plan at home. Either he drew it in the field, planning a departure from his established route, or someone replicated his handwriting perfectly. Searchers followed the route marked on the map. They descended into the drainage. At the point marked here, they found a small clearing in the rhododendron, approximately 20 feet across, mossy ground, low canopy, the kind of hidden clearing that you could walk past 100 times and never see. No Boyd, no trace of Boyd, no footprints in the moss, no broken branches, no evidence that anyone had been in the clearing recently, or ever. 64 people searched for Boyd Chesser over 23 days. He was not found. A map marking a route that was not planned. A word in handwriting that matches but should not exist. A clearing at the end of a red line that contains nothing. Case 12, the analysis. I have mapped all 12 disappearance locations from this investigation. They span 4 states, 5 national forests, 1 national park. The elevations range from 2,400 to 5,000 feet. The terrain includes river valleys, ridge lines, creek crossings, alpine meadows, and dense forest. The dates span 55 years. The victims ranged in age from 6 to 67, male and female, experienced hikers and casual day trippers. On the surface, these cases have nothing in common except geography. They all happened in the Appalachian Mountains. That is not surprising. The Appalachians see millions of visitors every year. Some percentage will disappear. Statistics make this inevitable. But when I mapped the locations, I found something the statistics do not explain. One topographic feature connects every disappearance site. Every site is within 500 yards of a drainage that flows northwest. Not north, not west, northwest, between 310 and 330 degrees on the compass. 12 drainages, 12 disappearances, all flowing in the same direction through terrain that should produce drainages flowing in many different directions based on the local topography. I calculated the probability of this occurring by chance. If drainages in mountainous terrain flow in random directions based on local slope, the probability that 12 independent sites would all be within 500 yards of a northwest flowing drainage is approximately 1 in 22,000. I checked the math twice. I had a statistician at a university check it a 3rd time. 1 in 22,000. The Cherokee called certain locations in these mountains the darkening land. places where the sun did not reach, places where the water flowed in directions that did not match the slope, places where the trails became unreliable and the forest grew in ways that did not follow the expected patterns, places that hunters avoided, places that the old stories warned against. Northwest flowing drainages in terrain that the topography says should flow northeast or east or south. The water is going the wrong way, and at every place where the water goes the wrong way, a person has disappeared, and an impossible object has been left at the threshold where the trail meets the forest. I do not know what is at the end of these drainages. I do not know what is northwest. I do not know why the water flows toward it, or why the items are placed at the point where someone crossed from the world of trails into whatever lies beyond them. I know 12 names. I know 12 objects. I know 12 thresholds where something was left behind that cannot be explained by accident, by weather, by animals, by disorientation, or by the actions of a rational person acting under their own power. A watch that runs backward at the scene and forward everywhere else. A journal with entries from days that had not happened. A photograph of a departure taken by a camera the departed should not have had. A stone from 400 miles away, with a handprint that is millions of years old. A compass that points south at one location on Earth and north everywhere else. A map drawn by a missing man showing a route to a place called here. The Rangers found these things at every scene for 55 years. They wrote them down. They sealed them in evidence bags. They filed the reports. They moved on to the next search because there is always a next search. I read the reports together. I saw the pattern. I mapped the drainages. I measured the compass bearings. I catalogued the objects. And now I know something that the individual reports could never show. The Appalachian Mountains are not just losing people. They are documenting the losses. In objects placed at thresholds. In items that defy their own physics. In evidence that points northwest into the oldest rock on the continent. Toward something that pulls the water and the compass needles and the people in the same direction. These mountains are 400 million years old. They have been here since before the dinosaurs, since before the Atlantic Ocean existed, since before anything we would recognize as complex life walked on land. 400 million years of rock and water and forest and whatever has had time to develop in the spaces between. 400 million years is time enough for anything. In the drainages that flow the wrong way, in the clearings that do not appear on maps, in the places where the items are left and the people are taken, and the forest closes behind them, like a door that was never open. If you hike in these mountains, look at the ground, look at the water, notice which way it flows. If the drainage runs northwest and the map says it should run east, pay attention. You are standing near a threshold. Watch for items that do not belong. Flashlights standing upright. Cairns built without footprints. Objects arranged with a precision that accident does not produce. The mountains have been leaving messages at thresholds for longer than anyone has been reading them. We are reading them now. The question is whether we are reading them in time. Whether understanding the pattern changes anything. Whether knowing where the thresholds are helps anyone avoid them, or only makes us more aware of what we cannot prevent. I have spent 14 months on this investigation. I have read more search reports than I can count. I have talked to family members who lost people they loved and never got answers. I have catalogued evidence that should not exist. And I still do not know what happens at the thresholds. I do not know where the water leads. I do not know what is northwest. I do not know who or what leaves the objects behind, or why they display them for the next person to find. I only know that the pattern is real. The evidence is documented. The disappearances are ongoing. The Appalachian Triangle is not a place on a map. It is a pattern in the evidence, a signature that repeats across 55 years of losses, a message written in flashlights and glasses and cairns and watches and journals and compasses. If you can read the message, share it. Tell someone else what to watch for. Because the mountains are still taking people, and they are still leaving things behind at the threshold. And somewhere in these 400 million years of rock, there is an answer to what the evidence means. I am still looking for that answer, and the mountains are still waiting for the next person who walks past the drainage that flows the wrong way and does not notice which direction the water is moving. Stay on the trail, watch the water, and if you find something that should not be where it is, arranged in a way that accident cannot explain, do not touch it. Take a photograph, mark the coordinates, and walk back the way you came, because whoever left that object there left it for a reason, and the reason is older than anyone who is still alive to ask.